Good afternoon. Do I have the next one? Yep. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Education Finance Committee. We have a pretty full agenda here today, but before we get into that, I am going to make sure I get on the right page. And then also, we've been asked by the Sergeant's Office to lay out some existing guidelines for our decorum and committee, just so that we can keep hearings civil and safe and secure for all attendees and legislators. So signs and place cards are not permitted in the hearing room. Verbal outbursts, shouting, or disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. Applause or other audible demonstrations are not allowed. For safety reasons, standing or sitting in the walkways and aisles or standing and obstructing in your chair is prohibited. If you require any accommodations, please speak with the sergeant staff identified by the gold ties. Troopers and house security personnel are present to ensure everyone's safety. And if you receive an entrance ticket, please retain it, as it may be required for re-entry if you leave the hearing room. Failure to comply with any of these guidelines may result in removal, which we hope doesn't happen. Our goal is to conduct these proceedings efficiently and effectively while ensuring everybody's opportunity to observe and participate. With that, members, welcome back to session. While we await the February forecast, we'll be hearing presentations and bills in order to be ready for whatever may come our way. We do have some new staff faces and have some minutes, but I think because we have such a full agenda of testifiers, we'll wait to do that at the end if we have time. And then with that, let's see here. With that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Co-Chair Krisha for a few comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome back. I know you had some changes in your life as well, so congratulations to all those without getting into details. Members, today I'll be brief, but we'll be hearing testimony, some very emotional stories about a serious issue with questions, emotions, and discussions on both sides of the immigration enforcement issue. As Minnesota State legislators, we are once again working through the actions from the federal government, not unlike the consequences of underfunding special education and forcing our schools to balance that shortfall. Federal officials have already announced, and Governor Walz confirmed, that immigration enforcement operations are returning to normal. It is clear the increased activity was disruptive, and we are obligated to measure the disruption and consider the education finance ramifications. Moreover, we need to continue to measure the impacts and difficulties being raised by school leaders and teachers and students before this. Mandates are still weighing on school budgets. Educational funding was cut at the direction of Governor Walz by $400 million. A $730 million state office building will raise while compensatory aid is still unfair, uneven, and faltering. The $500 million Feeding Our Futures fraud is still being investigated, with recent new changes announced even today, and affecting children and vulnerable adults. And the issues and the list goes on. These issues do not stem from the immigration enforcement. These issues have not been resolved. Nor have we heard the Walz-Flanagan administration discuss the 16% drop in reading proficiency, 18% drop in math proficiency, or the 23% drop in science proficiency. I also want to be clear that our schools are not the problem. I am not aware of any reports of schools knowingly employing undocumented immigrants. I am not aware of any schools denying access to public education based on immigration status, and I am not aware of schools opening their doors and inviting ICE to roam their hallways. Our schools are caught in the middle of a political fight between federal enforcement of laws and local counties and cities resisting those laws and that enforcement. If we want federal agents away from our schools, we must not blame the schools, nor expect the school staff to solve the problem. The most efficient solution is to demand the cooperation of the federal, state, and local governments to achieve the lawful resolution. And finally, we are back to normal operations, which means there still are operations. And Minnesota has an immigration enforcement presence. These officers, neighbors, family, friends are not terrorists, and while the resistance theater may feel good, it doesn't solve the problem. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with that, members, our committee has worked really hard to keep students at the center of all our decisions here, as well as make sure our schools have the resources to meet our students' needs, and to make sure that our administrators, teachers, and staff and school staff have what they need to educate our students. and absolutely to make sure that our schools are safe places. In the 2023 and 24, we made legislature, we made historic investments in the schools to do just that. And last year together, we also did our best to keep the focus on our students and their learning environment, their mental health, and to improve attendance numbers. According to the student survey and discussion with administrators, we were just seeing the benefits of those investments. Our district started the school year with the hope of continuing that progress, but those hopes were dashed when the U.S. Department of Homeland Security brought Operation Metro Surge to our communities across the state. We've heard from our schools, and our students have been directly detrimentally impacted. From the staff's mental health and attendance numbers slipping, to their students' mental health and fear for their safety in the school buildings, bus stops, and communities where they have been threatened by 3,000 plus ICE agents that set up shop in Minnesota. To put that in perspective, on average, there's 150 hardworking agents that are usually here focused on very specific immigration enforcement, not like what we've seen with Metro Surge. I could say a lot more about the activities of these agents that I've seen in my own city, but we have members of our school community here today to share their stories. With the help of our education organizations and partners, we have parents, teachers, administrators, school board members, nutrition staff, counselors, and more here today to share the impacts of Operation Metro Surge that they're seeing in their schools with their own eyes. In the packets, you have a few letters. I want to call attention to the letter from our education organizations with their asks and what they've been seeing. Please give the testifiers space and grace to share their experiences. And on behalf of our committee, I would like to thank them for being here, willing to share their observations with us, and more importantly, to share the stories of others who are not able to be here out of fear. So with that, I would like to welcome our first three testifiers to the table. I'll also tell you who's on deck so we can keep things moving. We've asked them to kind of keep things to 2 or 3 minutes. Please try to be respectful to all who have been up here to testify. The other testifiers, please be respectful of your time limit. So the first ones we have on deck would come up, please, would be Heidi Nisler, Assistant Superintendent for St. Paul Public Schools, Senna Stenvik, Superintendent for Columbia Heights School District, Leslie Shirk, Principal of Columbia Academy at Columbia Heights. On deck is Kevin Centeno, Full-Service Community School Coordinator from Valley View Elementary School, Columbia Heights, Dr. Bill Adams, Superintendent with Wilmer Public Schools, and Sarah Leitner, Principal from Groveland Elementary, St. Paul School District. So with that, as people are now settled, I will turn it over to Heidi Nisler. Could you please state your name and position for the record and proceed?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Heidi Nisler. I'm an Assistant Superintendent of Specialized Services for St. Paul Public Schools. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. St. Paul Public Schools serves over 32,000 students, of which over 6,000 students receive special education services. While much of the conversation about the impact of immigration enforcement is focused on schools as a whole, I want to bring your attention today to a quiet but incredibly significant crisis as well, the impact this is having on children with disabilities and our families who are trying to navigate the special education systems in our schools. For a student with an IEP, consistency isn't just a preference, it's an educational necessity. In early January, we saw the fragility of that consistency. In several Minnesota school districts, including my own, special education vans, vehicles carrying some of our most vulnerable students to their required services were pulled over by federal agents. These were children with disabilities on their way to school in a district vehicle. We must consider the reality of that moment. For any student, but especially a student with a disability, the appearance of masked agents is not a routine interaction. It is a high-intensity traumatic event that can cause a severe emotional response, and it creates a sense of fear associated with simply coming to school. The fear has extended far beyond our school buildings. We are seeing a trend of total isolation among targeted families with children who receive special education services. Many parents are not only keeping their children home from school, they are also canceling vital medical services for their children out of fear of separation. They are faced with an impossible choice: seek the services their child needs to grow and make progress, or stay in their homes to avoid the risk of separation. When a child misses a month of specialized instruction, they don't maintain their skills, they lose ground. The milestones they've worked for years to reach, learning to communicate, learning to read, becoming more independent with their ability to regulate their emotions, that is being erased by a climate that has made the simple act of leaving the house feel like a life-altering risk. The impact of a stopped van or a disrupted service does not go away when agents leave. That impact manifests in the quiet regression of a student who was finally making progress, and it will linger in the collective anxiety of our families and educators. While our schools will never stop showing up for our students, we cannot address these impacts on our own. I ask that you hold the weight of these stories in your mind as you determine the future of education, finance, and safety in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Nisler. Next up, we have Superintendent Stenvick. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon. Zena Stenvick, Superintendent of Columbia Heights Public Schools. Chair Joachim, Chair Krisha, members of the board. Columbia Heights Public Schools serves about 3,400 students, 800 of whom recently enrolled in our online learning program solely out of fear. Our school district has been massively impacted by the actions taken by DHS and ICE in our community over the last several weeks. Several students have been pulled over on their way to high school. Dozens of parents have been taken and detained. 7 of our students were detained during this surge, 6 of whom were taken to the Dilley Detention Center in Texas within a few hours of being apprehended. I spoke with a young mother yesterday about her experience being detained with her children. She was picked up while at her immigration appointment. She entered the country legally. She was following all the rules. She asked the agents repeatedly what she had done to be detained and sent to Texas. None of them offered any rationale or evidence of her wrongdoing. Given her legal status, she was returned and released after 6 days. But before being released, she was told if she wanted to be released with her children, she would be required to wear an ankle monitor. Again, no crime was committed. All of the families I've worked with have come to this country by legal means. I've seen their immigration paperwork with my own eyes. They're not violent criminals. They're mothers, fathers, children, and our neighbors. I want to thank the hundreds of community members, teachers, staff, parents, who have shown up for our community by standing on every corner every day in the bitterly cold mornings. Representative Feist and Representative Cagle have both supported our community during this time. Community members continue to rally around our schools, delivering weekly groceries, providing rent assistance, and picking up desperately needed medications from the pharmacies. I also want to thank the Minnesota legislature for passing the inflationary adjustment mechanism. Because we now know earlier in the year that we will receive a 2.69% on the formula, we are able to create a budget in a much more timely manner. Our school district enrollment is down 130 students now compared to last year, which is about $2 million deficit that we're expecting. This decline comes at a time when we are faced with a $3.6 million decline in compensatory funding, and those are just 2 of the funding streams that are causing stressors on our system. The funding shortfalls aside, our school community will need support to repair the harm that was inflicted on our students, families, and staff. The learning loss and social emotional toll will require additional staff to provide academic recovery and mental health support. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next up, Leslie Shirk. Please state your name for the record and
Yes,
proceed.
Leslie Shirk. Good afternoon, co-chairs and members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Leslie Shirk, and I'm the principal of Columbia Academy, the middle school serving students in grades 6 through 8 in Columbia Heights with Superintendent Stenvick. We have about 720 middle school students. Roughly half are English language learners, and many come from immigrant families. We used to begin our mornings at Columbia Academy focused on instruction and student engagement and academic growth. Now we begin crisis response. Phone calls about a parent that was detained over the night, students absent because families are afraid to leave their homes, reports of ICE vehicles near our bus stops, and staff reorganizing dismissal so that no child walks home alone in fear. We have students and parents in detention right now. More than 200 of our 720 have shifted to online learning, which we had to pivot and create because families felt that school was too risky. Our hallways are quieter, and not because our learning has slowed, it's because fear has kept children out of our schools. We have students and parents, our priorities have expanded well beyond academics. We are still a school. We're still teaching math and literacy and science. We still are administering assessments and we're tracking growth with data. But we are also a food distribution center, a transportation coordinator, a counseling hub, a legal resource connector for families, and the first call that families make when they're in crisis. And this has taken an emotional toll on our students, our families, our staff that we can't even measure at this point. As we look at the future of schools as hubs for families, which we were long doing before this surge and we will continue to do long after, I need you to understand something very clearly. We are drastically under-resourced to sustain this level of crisis response. We were already addressing food insecurity, mental health needs, academic recovery, but the surge has layered on legal navigation, transportation coordination, expanded virtual learning, and intensive emotional support on top of that is not going to go away with these agents. Schools cannot continue to absorb systemic shocks without systemic support, and that's where you come in. This is my first year as a principal, believe it or not, and this was not on my bingo card, to be perfectly honest, living through this. I've never had to lead through anything like this, and I've definitely never spoken before a group of politicians before, okay? But I have watched you all from afar as an educator. And I'm hoping that you will make the right decisions for children and for public education, no matter what side of the aisle you are on or what side of this room you sit in. Today, I'm here simply telling you the truth about what it feels like inside our schools. There is fear, and fear erodes attendance, trust, and learning. So my question to this committee is this: how will this committee and this House respond to what you're hearing today from all of these people that will testify? How will you show up not only in your voice and your comments, but your votes? We are going to continue to show up every single day for our students, and we hope that you will show up with us for all of our schools, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. Thank you.
Thank you, and you did a good job for your first testimony. With that, next up is Kevin Centeno, Dr. Bill Adams, and Sarah Leitner. And on deck is Dr. Brenda Lewis, Dr. Kalandra Hines, and Abdi Ibrahim. And we'll start first once you get settled with Kevin Centeno, full-service community school coordinator from Valley View Middle School in Columbia Heights. Please state your name for the record. Proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Kevin, last name is Centeno. Thank you, co-chairs, members of the committee. My name is Kevin Centeno. I'm a full-service community school coordinator at Valley View Elementary in Columbia Heights Public Schools. I worked in Columbia Heights for the past 5 years, and prior to that, 3 years in St. Paul Public Schools. As I reflect on what to share in my testimony, I found myself deeply about my work, about our schools, and the changes that have gone over the years, especially in these past 10 weeks under the Operation Metro Surge, and the impact it has on our students and families. I grew up in a household of educators. My father dedicated 26 years of service, my mother 20 years of service, my older sister 15 years of service, and my youngest sister 4 years of service, but she has been in South Korea. I learned from an early age both sides of financial hardship that teachers endure and deeply passion that carries with their students. Education has never been just a job in my family. It's been a calling. Metro Surge has placed immense strain on our schools. Our buildings are no longer just a sole place of learning, but for some of our students and families, it has become a place of fear, but others have become a source of emotional support, trauma care, and for many have become a food bank or a lifeline for basic needs. This didn't transform overnight. As a community school, we work tirelessly to stand in the gap, to ensure the feelings of safe, welcoming, and supported. But we cannot ignore what the policies and decisions, the decisions that made for our students sitting in our classrooms. I ask you to reflect on how this can affect your families, your children, your grandkids, your nieces and nephews. So I ask for your support for my families and your own families in your own communities. Our schools are the heart of our neighborhoods. We protect, we support them, but we also support every single being in our buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Dr. Bill Adams, Superintendent, Wilmer Public Schools. Thank you for traveling here.
Madam Chair and members of this committee, thank you. My name is Bill Adams, and I'm Superintendent of Wilmer Public Schools located in west central Minnesota, considered rural. And I am here to share factual data regarding the operation and educational impacts of recent immigration enforcement activities on our district. For context, we serve roughly 4,000 students, and according to the website Niche, the 8th most diverse school district in the state of Minnesota. During the week of December 17th, following the first reports of ICE activity in Wilmer, our student absences more than doubled, jumping from an average of 230 daily to just under 600. Attendance stabilized until the week of January 12th, when one of our students was detained by ICE agents downtown. I can confirm that this student is a legal resident, and she returned home after several days, but the event triggered a severe disruption. That week, out of our 4,000 students, we saw an average of 936 daily absences, peaking at 1,214 on a single day, nearly 30%. To illustrate why, I want to share a factual report. On January 15th, a legal U.S. citizen attending our area learning center was stopped by ICE agents immediately after parking near the school. They demanded extra verification of his citizenship and student status before allowing him inside. He arrived deeply frightened and lost vital instructional time, needing to spend the morning with the school counselor to process the encounter. When families hear about legal citizens being stopped steps from our doors, it directly explains the unprecedented fear and the 1,200 absences we saw on that one day and the 960 some average. Even as attendance began to recover by late January, we experienced a major operational shift. About 130 students transferred to our online learning platform. When staff contacted families, parents explicitly cited fear as the primary driver across all demographics. Families of our Black and brown students feared profiling and family separation, even as legal residents. White families reported keeping children home due to anxieties about potential armed law enforcement activity in our school buildings. Educationally, these disruptions create measurable learning loss despite our staff's relentless work. There is no substitute for in-person learning, and we anticipate a negative impact on our MCA achievement data this spring. Operationally, my own role shifted. I spent days driving between schools, bus stops, and conducting home visits when parents were reportedly detained solely to verify an adult was present to care for the students. Fortunately, we have only processed 2 15-day enrollment drops. However, the events of the past 2 months have caused tangible disruptions to our primary mission of educating students. I am hopeful we can stabilize our learning environment and return to the welcoming community Wilmer is known to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Next, Sarah Leitner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Sarah Leitner, and I'm the principal of Groveland Park Elementary School in the St. Paul Public Schools. Today, I'd like to share with you some stories of Groveland to better illustrate the impact of ICE has had on our students. A mother, father, and child had not been going to work or school so that they could stay together as a family unit. When the father had to return to work, the mother and child stayed home, opting to have their child enroll in our virtual option. The following days, ICE was active in their neighborhood, and the father had to return to work. The parents made the difficult decision to send their child to school because they were worried that if ICE arrived at the house, they would take him with the mother. Some of our students live in a neighborhood of apartment complexes almost entirely housing immigrant families. ICE was very regularly in their neighborhood. Families were scared to go to the bus stop, but they wanted their children to be at school. One father started driving his kid to school. When the dad was late to pick up the children, one of the kids was sobbing in the office when I came in from buses because he was afraid that his dad was taken by ICE. A family who had opted for the virtual option texted to see if I could come get their iPad because they were moving. I went to the home to get the iPad from the high school sister, and when I got back to the car, I realized it was the end of the month and they might need rent assistance. So I texted the mom and I said, "Can we help you with the rent?" And she said, "Our bags are packed. We are leaving in the middle of the night. I'm tired of being trapped." And then there's stories of joy of returning to in-school in-person instruction. A student called me last week and said, "Mrs. Leitner, can I come back?" And I said, "Of course." And she said, "You know, when you do gym class virtually, you just sit there. And when you come to school, you get to run around." So these stories are significant, and yet Groveland has a far less percentage of kids online than other elementary schools in our district. Families and children have been living in fear for months. While ICE activity might be decreasing, the impact will still be present and painful. Children and families have experienced significant trauma and yet again lost valuable learning time. Fear, either at home or at school, impedes learning. Continued investment in our schools will be crucial in the next steps of healing and learning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your time as well. Next up, we have Dr. Brenda Lewis, Dr. Kalandra Hines, and Abdi Hakim Ibrahim. Once you get settled, Dr. Lewis, I'll let you go first and state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brenda Lewis, Superintendent, Fridley Public Schools. Fridley Public Schools serves about 2,700 students. 80% are students of color, 72% come from families experiencing poverty, and 20% are English language learners. We're heavy East African, heavy Somali, heavy West African, heavy Hispanic Latino. We also serve a high-need special education population and operate Setting 4 programming that serves students from 10 districts in addition to Fridley. We also receive significant compensatory education funding, which is directly tied to enrollment. Since December, we have 112 students who are no longer enrolled with us. This is directly tied to the ICE surge. About 400 students have moved into virtual learning due to safety concerns. The financial impact in our district and all districts is immediate and also long-term. The loss of 112 students represents at least $1.2 million in annual revenue to our district. This hits our district especially hard. Compensatory ed revenue supports core instruction. Special education funding already does not cover the full cost of required services. We are now facing continued reductions in special education, while enrollment fluctuations and ongoing certainty around comp ed funding are creating continued instability in our budget planning. Meanwhile, our costs are rising, and the costs are also very unpredictable and unexpected due to the ICE surge. Virtual learning still requires licensed staff, support staff, curriculum, devices, and services. We did not have a virtual learning option prior to January. We are also paying for academic recovery and expanding our mental health supports, both for students and staff. The mental health needs in our district for staff go well beyond the employee assistance program. None of this is coming with new funding. Minnesota's 15-day drop rule means these enrollment losses translate directly into reduced state aid this year, immediately, and going into next year, even though our district cannot reduce staffing and services in real time. The result here is simple. The ICE surge is reducing revenue, increasing costs, and has pushed already strained districts' budgets into a much deeper financial problem that will be felt immediately and years to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Dr. Hines.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, for the invitation to come and share about the impact of ICE in St. Louis Park Public Schools. As communication began to come in late November about Operation Metro Surge, we grounded our processes with the understanding that schools were sanctuary areas where immigrants were safe. We put protocols in place to ensure that our students and staff would be protected while on school grounds. My stance was that the safest place for our students was at school. But after the murder of Alex Purdy, I could not continue that stance. The rules of engagement had changed. I witnessed that at Aquila Elementary, which is across the street from a housing development, where I personally observed ICE agents surveillancing the apartment complex. Later that day, our students, families, and staff witnessed ICE invading the development at dismissal. You have heard from other testifiers here today about the experiences of students and families and how their communities stepped up to support their neighbors. And I would like to ditto that about St. Louis Park. But today, I would like to share with you the trauma that Operation Metro Surge has imposed on our staff. I have to publicly thank our staff for creating a positive distraction for our students as the environment outside of their windows is filled with anxiety and fear. But the physical, mental, and emotional load that our staff are carrying needs to be highlighted. As I speak personal, local, and immediate, I have never thought in my lifetime as an educator that I would have to put aside my focus on academic achievement to focus on the safety of our students, families, and staff from our federal government. This is not what I signed up for, but nevertheless, it is what I'm here to do. I would like for you all to understand and hear What I would like for you all to understand and to hear is that the traumatic impact of this surge has had not only on our students and our families, but also our staff and our administrators. The impact goes beyond those that have been directly kidnapped or detained by ICE agents, but those that have witnessed or experienced the actions and the movements of ICE agents within our neighborhoods and our communities. I tell you that these tactics are not new. It is history repeating itself. I would like to cover 3 areas that have impacted our staff: mental health and well-being, increased workload, and increased operational cost. There is heightened anxiety and trauma and difficulty concentrating for our staff. School counselors and school social workers have experienced increased workloads related to immigration fears. What this looks like is that our counselors and staff are working beyond the school day in order to respond to parents and students inquiring about, can I come to school? Is it safe? Is there a way for you to change our transportation route so that we don't have to walk to school? Increased workloads. Our administrators and our front office staff have spent significant time responding to parent concerns about safety and enforcement practices. There was ICE presence nearly every day for 2 months. Work dedicated to instructional leadership was redirected to developing protocols for responding to enforcement inquiries. Our ML teachers became the first contact for our families when it came to absences and looking for resources. Our cultural liaisons bore the emotional weight of our families as they worked to find resources for families. Extended mental health services and trauma-informed training require additional funding. Translation, legal consultation, and community engagement efforts increase administrative costs. Transportation adjustments may also increase operational costs. So here is my ask. Allocate funding for trauma-informed support and attendance recovery initiatives. Protect funding streams from fluctuations caused by fear-driven absenteeism. Invest in mental health and multilingual family engagement infrastructures. Immigration policy decisions have downstream impacts on public education systems. School functions best when students feel safe. Families trust institutions, and staff can focus on teaching and learning. And when enforcement activities disrupt that stability, the consequences for educational are through the educational, financial, and generational impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. I'll let you go a little bit over because I can't cut off one of my own superintendents. So, but thank you for being here. Next up, I have Abdi Hakim Ibrahim, a parent but also former school board member. Go ahead and state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Abdi Hakim Ibrahim. I am a parent of Akula Elementary School in St. Louis Park, also a former St. Louis Park School Board member. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Since the Operation Metro began in December, it has real feasible impact on families in our community. Many families in our community come from immigrants' background, including my own. The presence of federal agents carrying out aggressive enforcement actions in the neighborhood in our schools created fear, anxiety, and uncertainty for our children. This fear is not abstract. My own children talk about it. They heard about the tragic loss of two Minnesotans, Renee Good and Alex Brady. They asked whether the school will be closed. The kind of anxiety affected their sense of safety, their ability to focus, and overall well-being. I have seen children hesitate, stay home. Some parents understandable upgrade to choose to keep their kids home or move virtual learning. This is not the decision for parents to make lightly. It's a decision driven by fear. When children stay home, they lose more than class instructions. They lose daily routines, peer relationships, emotional support, access services for students receiving special educations and multilingual learners and students who are getting additional supports can be disruptive and can set them back for academically and mentally. Aquila is more than buildings, it's community. Our students rely on stable, they rely on familiar teachers, trusted staff, consistent routine. Right now, the stability field for a child. The staff morale have been affected. We know stable school is dependent on stable educators. As a parent, I ask you to look beyond the spreadsheets. Consider our children's life experience, stability, consistency, community matters. Our students deserve through solution protecting their environment while addressing the financial challenge responsibly. Our children cannot learn with fears. Please choose stability, choose equity, choose protect schools that protect our children. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Lori Smith from St. Cloud Public Schools, Joy Shinan, Executive Director from Minnesota Association of Charter Schools, Kristen Gillespie, Board Member from Minnesota Schools Psychologists Association, and then in the wings, we have Christopher Griggs, Cara Hun, and Danica Regnahild. With that, as people get settled, I will kick it over first to Lori Smith. Please state your name for the record and where you're from.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Lori Smith, and I'm a cook in St. Cloud and a trustee on the Executive Board of 284. The state of Minnesota made sure that every student had access to nutritious meals at school, regardless of their parents' income or ability to pay. That made a huge difference, and thank you for that. I know the kids who come through my lunch line, and I can always tell who doesn't get enough to eat at home. Even though I'm not supposed to, I slip those kids a little bit extra. Many of the kids who don't get enough at home are the same students who have not felt safe enough to come to school because of the ICE surge. I don't know the documentation status of any of the kids, but if you're thinking that only kids of color stay at home, you'd be wrong. Lots of white kids have missed weeks of school too. Nutrition is one of the most important factors for student growth and academic success. Children behave and learn better when they're well nourished. Free meals are a good investment in our future, and it breaks my heart that some of the kids who need it most aren't benefiting from the program right now. I've worked in the St. Cloud Public Schools for a long time, and I've never seen a situation like this. Until recently, schools were off-limit for ICE. We should go back to that. Kids have enough to worry about. Everyone should feel safe at school. Thank you for all the work you do to ensure that our kids have all they need to learn, grow, and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Joy Sheenan, please state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Chair Joachim and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Joey Chenyan. I serve as the Executive Director of the Minnesota Association of Charter Schools. I'm here representing chartered public school leaders across Minnesota who are currently operating in sustained emergency mode due to the immigration enforcement surge of the last 3 months. What I'm about to describe is not partisan or political rhetoric. It is what school leaders are reporting daily. This is not about immigration policy. It is about the unintended consequences of recent actions on schools and students. Since enforcement operations escalated, schools have reported ICE vehicles parked near buildings and in school parking lots, agents using binoculars to look into classrooms, armed individuals making arrests in neighborhoods where children walk to school, unmarked vehicles detaining community members just outside school grounds, agents boxing in buses and waiting at bus stops, staff detained on their way to work and asked for proof of citizenship, minors stopped or detained without their parents, and families transferred out of the state. This is happening in school communities across Minnesota, and the result is profound academic disruption. Regardless of immigration status, many families are afraid to leave their homes. Parents are keeping children home after seeing arrests in their neighborhoods. Attendance is swinging dramatically, with some schools reporting 40 to 50% of students absent in recent weeks, despite significant efforts to reconnect with them. Schools are shifting to hybrid and online learning to help connect with kids, but academic progress is being disrupted in real time. Hard-won post-pandemic gains are being undone. Staff are burning out after months of double duty. Field trips, sports, recess, and after-school programs have been restricted or canceled. Buildings have tightened security. Time that should be spent on instruction is being spent on safety planning. Teachers and leaders are being threatened and harassed. Some schools have received bomb threats. Students are missing classmates who vanish overnight. Many are witnessing arrests in their neighborhoods. There is growing psychological trauma and a loss of trust in institutions that are meant to protect communities. Students continue to disappear from classrooms, and when students disappear, so does funding, especially in schools serving higher concentrations of English learners and BIPOC students. Many of these schools already operate on thin margins. We are deeply concerned about budgets destabilized simply because of the students these schools serve during this emergency. Let me be clear. Schools are asking for stability. They are asking for clarity around testing and compliance requirements. They are asking for flexibility. They are asking for your support. Children are being impacted regardless of citizenship status, and these are Minnesota's children sitting in Minnesota classrooms. When fear becomes part of the learning environment, every child loses. As a result, we will see sustained learning loss, long-term mental health consequences, deepened achievement gaps, and financial destabilization of vulnerable schools. And all of these things need to be addressed. So we urge this body to step up, provide flexibility to deal with the consequences of these emergency conditions, provide stabilization and fiscal support for schools experiencing sudden enrollment and revenue swings, and provide school safety funding for chartered public school students to address the extraordinary security costs schools have absorbed and to protect students moving forward. Schools are often the most stable place in a child's life. Right now, that stability is cracking. Our leaders and staff are showing up every day, and they are hanging on by a thread. Our schools need your support because the consequences of this moment will be long-lasting. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Sheenan. No matter how many times I write it down phonetically, I still get it wrong. I'm sorry about that. Kristen Gillespie, please state your name for the record and proceed.
My name is Kristen Gillespie, Kristen without the R. To my students, I'm known as Ms. G. I'm here as a school psychologist from the Minnesota School Psychologists Association. And thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I echo what many have said on the impact on attendance, safety, and learning for all students, and particularly students with disabilities, which is the population I work with the most. I've seen myself and heard from multiple colleagues around the state the negative impact this is having for students, staff, families, and communities, and economies. Questions I've heard personally from my high school students include, why do they hate us, Ms. G? When will it be safe? What if somebody pretending to be ICE tries to make me get in their car? And how will I know if they're real, Ms. G? The U.S. is supposed to be a cut above the rest, a place that provides opportunity, a country of law and due process for everyone inside its borders. I believe as a society we owe it to the students of Minnesota and across the nation, the students who represent our future and all that is possible, something better than this. I've watched the schools and communities in Minnesota come together to do everything they can do to provide not just education, but basic needs to students and families. And we will continue to do so as long as it takes. Please support us in this mission. Thank you.
Thank you, and I have corrected your name for the record for the minutes. I so appreciate your being here. Next up, we have Christopher Griggs, Kara Hun, and Danica Ragnald. And on deck is Amy Cram Helwig, Tammy Napper, and Carlo Franco. Once you get settled, Christopher Griggs, go ahead and state your name for the record and your position and proceed.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Griggs. I'm a social studies teacher at Edina High School. My name is Christopher Griggs. I'm a social studies teacher with 11 years experience working at the middle and high school levels in Minnesota classrooms. As this legislative session opens, I am here to advocate for the educators of our great state. While much of the discussion around school funding happens at a high level, I am here today to give you a view from the classroom. The hardships faced by our schools due to Operation Metro Surge are not just line items on a budget. Questions from students like, will they come here? Or what do I do if? Are emotional weights carried by our teachers. For many, the hypothetical questions became and remain all too real. Our jobs as teachers are becoming more complex, untenable, and heartbreaking. Teachers today are not just instructors. We are first responders, social workers, and technology coordinators. More recently, teachers have become grocery shoppers, laundry and carpool coordinators, and other sources of mutual aid. Operation Metro Surge has created a disruption that mirrors and in some ways exceeds the chaos of the pandemic. Statewide, we have been asked to shield students through lockdowns due to federal agent actions on school grounds. When these actions end, the task of consoling students and attempting to make sense of it all falls to the teachers too, responsibilities that we are not trained for. We are also, once again, being asked to bridge the gap between in-person and remote learning for families in crisis. This expectation doubles workloads and fragments the attention that we can give to each student. When targeted students feel safe returning to school, their teachers will work to address their learning loss. Not only content knowledge loss, but the loss of English language instruction as well. For educators, responsibilities are continually added, never removed or lessened. School support networks simply must be strengthened. The expectation cannot be for teachers to solve student trauma alone and simultaneously provide meaningful, high-quality instruction. Recovery funding is needed through your legislative action, such as recovery funding for more school psychologists and social workers for better mental health support at school. Recovery means more funding to support our state's multiple language learners, students who are learning English at school in addition to curriculum. Recovery funding is needed for high-quality multiple language teachers, educational assistants, school counselors, and paraprofessionals to help these students succeed at a high academic level. Minnesota schools and their educators must be provided with the appropriate recovery resources by this legislature to meet the needs of our students and the reality of 2026. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Christopher Griggs. Kara Hunt.
Thank you.
Kara Hun, Columbia Heights Public Schools. I'm a middle school teacher. I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to be here, and also Education Minnesota for asking me to be here today and yesterday in the other committee meeting, funding meeting. In that committee yesterday, a senator said the following: opportunities are being denied to our legal citizens because illegal immigrants are taking the limited resources that our children are supposed to have. I would like to take this opportunity and this stage to respond to that comment. First, to insinuate that our resources are so incredibly limited, while the federal government has allocated over $150 billion to their immigration brigade, is just a slap in the face to educators here in my district, across the state, and educators and students across the country. Next, I'd like us to consider the pie chart of my district, the students that are being terrorized by this activity. Yes, some of them are immigrants, but they are not illegal. They are here through a law-abiding asylum process, as far as I understand. And it is true, in Columbia Heights, we have many, many brown immigrants, but that is not the only students that we teach. I ask politicians that are hesitant to help us to maybe consider forgetting about our immigrants. We have plenty of other students that we can focus on that are, as the senator said yesterday, the type of humans that are deemed worthy of resources. The historical lack of funding and current instability caused by ICE in our community harms these students too. Lastly, I would like to make sure something is very clear. I work in Columbia Heights and I live in South Minneapolis and Powderhorn. These are two places that are extremely famous nationally right now. Because of this, I realized recently, not to sound too Minnesotan, but oh my gosh, everybody, all my family and all my friends across the nation think I live somewhere horrible. They think I live somewhere so dangerous. No, it's not horrible. It's absolutely beautiful. It always has been beautiful. We're proud of each other. We've been proud of each other, and we're not afraid. At least we haven't been afraid until the choices of government officials, both near and far, have filled us with this fear, not the existence of our immigrants and neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Danica Ragnhild.
Yes, I'm Danica Ragnhild, Whittier community member. When I started patrolling for the elementary school, Whittier Elementary, in my neighborhood, I wondered if I was overreacting. I quickly learned I wasn't. Early on, there was a day when ICE agents were parked on the street next to the school. Almost immediately, they began driving erratically, traveling the wrong way down one-ways, running through red lights and stop signs on streets directly next to the school. They did this driving unmarked vehicles while suited up in tactical gear and carrying deadly weapons. This was just before school started. Children were walking to school, getting off buses, and being dropped off by their parents. School staff, parents, and community members reacted quickly. We put our bodies in front of the children until ICE left the neighborhood, preventing their ability to harass these students. This was hardly the only time we had to respond to dangerous behavior from ICE agents. And while we would do our best to not indicate how stressed we were in those moments, smiling and talking with the children as if nothing was wrong, kids are not stupid. Kids can tell when adults are scared, and it scares them too. We were not able to protect every child, though, and so I want to go through one more example. The day Alex Preddy was murdered by ICE, all of my neighbors were tear-gassed. What might come to mind when I say this are probably the observers and the protesters that gathered shortly thereafter. But on top of the people in the street, the air was so saturated with tear gas along Nicollet that it seeped into the apartments and houses where children live. What were those children to do? What do you do to protect a child in that situation? I have no idea. What would it feel like to be a child and go through that? Poison entering your home, the place you're supposed to be most safe at? I have no idea. The one thing I know is that ICE's campaign of terror in our city not only didn't care how much it hurt children, frequently it targeted them. Our children are traumatized, and they need all the emotional, educational, and material support we can provide for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have two remote testifiers. Amy Kram-Helwig and Tammy Napper. But in the meantime, while they're speaking, I'll have Carlo Franco, Chris Stinson, and Anna Presthus can come up and get settled. With that, we'll go to our first remote testifier. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Amy Kram-Helwig, and I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Urban Debate League, a program of Augsburg University. We served almost 2,000 students across 10 school districts and charter schools last year. And debate's a proven after-school education intervention. For example, debaters versus peers have much higher attendance, GPAs, test scores, literacy rates, graduation rates, and college acceptance. Thank you for the opportunity to share how the surge has impacted our programming. I believe that members of the committee should have also received a copy of my recent op-ed in Newsweek, which details a few of the many examples of traumatic interruptions that have occurred, including learning loss. And I know this committee has made significant investments in literacy and battling chronic absenteeism, and it must frustrate and anger you to see this good work interrupted. I feel the exact same. On January 7th, after Renee Good was shot and killed, immigration agents arrived at Roosevelt High School during dismissal, where they tackled and detained a teacher and used tear gas and pepper spray on students and staff. We had planned to hold our first middle school debate tournament of the year at Roosevelt the following day. And I keep thinking about what would have happened if 150 11 and 12-year-olds had arrived to that scene. And we have been forced to move to virtual programming since to ensure everyone's safety. 1 week later, the Minnesota State High School League State Debate Tournament, the oldest MSHSL activity going back to 1902, had to be moved on 4 days' notice from the Cedar Riverside neighborhood because an anti-immigrant hate rally was scheduled for the same day as the tournament. All students competing across the state were impacted, with our most vulnerable students experiencing greater anxiety and fear, and what should have been a celebratory capstone experience. And additionally, our most vulnerable students, like many in our Spanish debate program, are not physically in school. Last year, we had over 300 students participating, and they were able to see their bilingualism as the asset it is. We're part of the solution in raising the graduation rates for these participants. But this year, we know that fewer students will compete and that student outcomes will be impacted. I come to you also as a mom. I know childhood is remarkably short, and this generation of students have had their educational experiences bookended by upheaval. In the scope of enormous trauma faced by our students this year, the loss of after-school programming could seem small, but it is documented learning loss. And when field trips, athletic games, and debate tournaments have to be canceled or moved online, it is just one more example of how our students' childhoods have been cut short. And so I would ask this committee to do what is in your power to stabilize and support schools to ensure that previous investments haven't been lost and that children can experience the fun, learning, and normalcy of after-school programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next remote testifier, Tammy Napper. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Hi, Tammy Knapper from Wilmer Public Schools. Hello, committee members. I'm a special education coordinator and also sit on the Education Minnesota Governing Board. I want to bring you into a school district in greater Minnesota, Wilmer, where fear has been quietly reshaping daily life. We serve about 4,000 students. On a typical day, around 250 are absent. That's normal: winter illness, appointments, life. But in mid-January, when ICE activity increased in our region, normal disappeared. In just 1 week, absences didn't rise a little, they exploded. 790 students gone, then 1,214. Over 1,000 kids missing school in a single day. The next week, the numbers stayed high: 512, 437, 500. Not because of a snowstorm, not because of COVID, because families were afraid to leave their homes. Afraid a parent might not be there when a child got off the bus. Afraid a routine traffic stop could separate a family. afraid that even lawfully present neighbors, asylum seekers, TPS holders, people with work authorization could be questioned, detained, and left to find their own way home. Wilmer didn't learn this from headlines. We heard it at the mosque. We heard it at the table at a local Mexican restaurant. Parents sharing fear in whispers, asking if school is still safe. We had a 19-year-old student taken into custody on January 12th. For days, her family didn't know where she was or if she was okay. She was released 5 days later, but the damage was done. Classmates noticed, teachers noticed. This student is eligible to attend high school as an English learner whose formal education was interrupted under Minnesota education guidelines. And the fear spread beyond immigrant families. White families kept kids home too, not out of politics, but because no child should worry about seeing armed agents in a place that's supposed to be safe. We also heard reports of agents eating at a local restaurant, then returning later to make their arrests. Workers at major employers were detained. ICE vehicles became a common sight. That kind of visibility changes how a whole community moves through its day. Public education runs on trust. When families don't feel safe sending their children through our doors, learning stops. Relationships strain. Trauma walks into our classrooms before the first bell even rings. This isn't abstract. It's attendance sheets, empty desks, and children carrying adult-sized fear into spaces that are supposed to be built for hope. As educators, our job doesn't stop at the classroom door. We must be the voice that says our schools are places of safety, dignity, and belonging for every child, no matter where they came from. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. We have Carlo Franco, Chris Stinson, and Anna Presthus here at the table. Why don't we start out with Carlo Franco?
Carlo Franco, St. Paul Public Schools. Good afternoon, Chair Joachim, Chair Creshaw, honorable members of the committee. My name is Carlo Franco, Treasurer of the St. Paul Public Schools Board of Education, a proud Latino representing 4 generations from St. Paul's historic West Side, the home of the first Latino neighborhood in Minnesota. St. Paul Public Schools is home to over 32,000 scholars, over 115 languages spoken, and over 77% of the student body being Black, Brown, or Indigenous, 34% of which receiving EL services. Over 7,700 of those students have experienced a temporary online learning option as a result of this federal occupation. I hear stories, and I see for myself every single day how families are being impacted, how they're being separated, how their needs are growing for the basic necessities to survive. And through it all, I have witnessed our community come together to take care of us. Our schools and community centers have become ice watering holes for federal agents with masks to surveillance, target, and kidnap our neighbors, many of whom U.S. citizens. ICE has consistently circled our school buildings, waving at our children while they record their parents dropping them off. Same thing with bus stops. Large raids next to school buildings that are actually home to our children. ICE illegally pulling over 2 of our special education vehicles that had students on them. We've had students taken in different states by the next day. It is impossible to go to any of our schools right now and know that, and not hear students talking about what is plaguing our community. Kindergartners, first graders coming home to say they're sad because their friends told them that they can't come back to school anymore because they're afraid. Their parents are telling them this. Our whole community has been impacted. Many, again, living in fear of leaving the house, basic needs going unmet, unable to work, students unable to go to school, learn with their peers, participate in the extracurricular activities that are so needed for positive growth and development, solely due to the fear of being discriminated against based on their language, their skin, and their location. This has caused a deep trauma that will be lived through our communities for years to come. This trauma will be processed by parents educators, staff members, coaches, caring adults who work every day to support our kids in spaces with looming budget cuts, in part due to the hundreds and hundreds of students that we've already seen stop coming to school, and we're projecting upwards of 900 not coming in next year's budget already. We also know that in state funding formulas, this will not only impact our this year's budget, but also the out year's budget significantly. We as schools will work tirelessly to support the learning and mental health needs of our students with less resources unless the legislature acts and works with us local districts to meet this moment. If nothing else, I ask you to choose humanity. Choose to believe the stories that our communities are telling you, because this is real. And do everything in your power to ensure that our kids have what they need now and in the future to not only survive, but thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Stinson, please state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Chair and members. My name is Chris Stinson. I'm the Policy Director for SEIU Local 284. We represent more than 10,000 school workers, including paraeducators, food service, custodians, bus drivers, and higher ed faculty throughout the state. Our union is working for a future where every student in Minnesota schools has all that they need to succeed. And you've heard about buses being boxed in, buses being followed. I'll just add that we had a bus driver who had to hold kids on the bus while ICE was raiding their apartment building because it wasn't safe to let them off the bus to go home. We represent EL paras in Rocori near the Pilgrim's Pride packing plant in Cold Spring, who say that only half the students have been showing up to school because of fear for their safety. We hear similar stories from across the state. The damage the federal government has inflicted on Minnesota's students is not limited to the Metro, despite the name Metro Surge. Many of our members of color have been followed by ICE, including one custodian where agents tried to follow him onto the loading dock of the school. We don't ask our members about their immigration status, but let me be clear, school district employees are authorized to be in and work in the United States. SEIU represents one member who was detained while getting groceries. She'd only been going to work, home, and the grocery store for weeks. She was quickly sent from Minnesota to the camps in Texas, and while she was in the camps, she missed the birth of her granddaughter. Her family was counting on her to help with the new baby. Attorneys with SEIU helped her file a habeas petition, and when a judge finally reviewed it, she was released. The judge said that she'd been unlawfully detained. The disruption to her family, the disruption to her school community, the fear, the deprivation, the time she's never going to get back, all of it was unlawful. The damage to our state, our kids, our schools, our dedicated staff is incalculable. And I hope that you'll do everything that you can to support our students and the adults who care for them every day.
Thank you. Anna Priesthouse. I'm sorry, I probably said that.
That's okay. My name is Anna Prestis. I'm a parent with the Bloomington Public Schools District, and today I'm going to be speaking on behalf of a Bloomington Public Schools staff member who did not feel comfortable being here today themselves. So I will now read their words. I don't have the strength or the capacity to share my story in person, but I'm grateful that someone was able to read it today. As a first-generation Mexican-American in Minnesota, this fear is not new. I grew up witnessing ICE raids, organizing school walkouts, and fearing an empty home, the same fear I see reflected in my students today. The fear we once had as kids has carried into adulthood. This is generational trauma. Our ancestors survived Operation Wetback, and we will survive Operation Metro Surge. Our bodies remember we've been here before. Around 5 a.m., my cell phone starts ringing. Almost every morning, a parent or guardian in the group chat starts off our day with a prayer, calling on our ancestors and the Creator to guide everyone safely to work and back home. Every day, there's another text message, a loved one detained, a student kept home, or a family forced to return to places they once fled. A series of gratitude will follow shortly after, thanking community members for culturally relevant groceries, bills and rent fundraised, gas tanks filled, laundry washed, formula delivered for babies, and in-home haircuts. Every now and then, a student will ask for some fast food, and how can you say no when they haven't had those delicious chicken tenders and fries for months now? We keep hearing the word safe, as if saying it makes it true. Families choose virtual learning to keep their children safe, only to face ICE agents knocking at their doors or their neighbors' doors, while community members honk horns, blow whistles, yell, "Don't open the door, ICE is here." We cannot guarantee safety. I keep asking myself, how is this sustainable? How are students supposed to learn when they're hungry, when their families are on the verge of eviction? And how do we make up for all this interrupted learning? At this point, we are surviving as we continue showing up for our students and their families while being afraid ourselves. Or do we ourselves even begin to ask for help when we're supposed to be the helpers? This moment demands that we listen to our Black and African-American brothers and sisters who have long warned us about racial profiling and to confront harm and anti-Blackness in our own communities. And remember, the narrative of us being immigrants does not apply when our roots run deeply in this land. And yet here we are, around 5 a.m., my phone will start to buzz. Someone will start the group chat with a prayer, manifesting for us all to make it home safely to our destination and back home again. For the observers, the helpers, the drivers, the gas tank filler uppers, the expecting mothers, and for you to be protected, guided, and replenished so we may continue to take care of each other one more day. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Dr. David Green, Maren Christian Hofer, Heather Starks, and then on deck, Hannah Graham, Tracy Bird, and Christian Ledesma. As soon as you get settled, I'll let Dr. David Green go first. Go ahead, state your name for the record and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and committee members for the opportunity to testify today. My name is David Green. I'm a software engineer and father of a student at St. Thomas More Catholic School here in St. Paul. I have stood guard at my child's school with other parents. Students have been afraid to come to school because of ICE activity. Families at our school have been torn apart. Nothing about this in any way is reflective of the Christian values taught at our school. The students are well aware of what's happening. We've had frank conversations with our child. None of this should have to be borne by preschool, elementary school, middle school, or high school kids. Yet here we are. My wife has patrolled at a local community school. Just last night, we had a report of a woman distraught that she could not find her brother at the school. We rushed over to help, but by the time we got there, she had left. No one knows if she ever found her brother. This past week, we have seen many vehicles loitering near both schools. It sure doesn't feel like a drawdown to me. This is not normal. None of this is normal. In fact, it should be highly disturbing to everyone that occupied vehicles are hanging around schools. Our neighborhood is on edge. Parents wait at the bus stop right outside our house, ready to whisk their children away before they can be taken from them. We used to see children walk to and from school every day. There are no pleasant walks home with classmates anymore. Over the years, friends and I have often discussed the question, would we have been brave during the civil rights movement of the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s? Now is the time we are answering that question. So I want to ask all of the committee members, in fact, everyone in this room, how will you act in the civil rights movement of today? Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Maren Christian Hofer.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and committee members.
My name is Maren Christensen Hofer, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Multicultural Autism Action Network, which is a nonprofit serving families of children with disabilities in multicultural communities. And I'm also a parent of a child with a disability. And before I begin, I want to mention that I came here to specifically lift up the stories of families with children with disabilities, but I want to acknowledge who is not here in the room with us for the most part. We love our educators and our administrators, and they have shown up for us in incredible ways, but with a few exceptions, we're not hearing from immigrant families. We know that that still doesn't feel very safe to many of them. But I want to say that if we start making policy decisions without centering the voices of the most impacted, we inevitably get it wrong. So if they cannot come to us, we need to go to them and hear what are the family's needs and how we can solve these problems. I also want to mention that I know the purview of this committee is education finance, but families do not live siloed lives in neat little buckets. Many of the families that we serve have been caught in a vice grip of disruption. They are unable to attend school. For many of them, virtual learning does not work very well. We know from COVID that for many students with disabilities, that just wasn't really an option. Communities of color are being targeted, and at the same time, many of these same families are experiencing major service disruptions tied to the ongoing fraud investigations. When we deliver groceries to families, sometimes in the middle of the night because it doesn't feel safe to get them during daylight, they will ask us questions like, who's going to take care of my child if I'm arrested and detained? I'm the only person in my family who knows how to do a G-tube, and I'm worried that they will starve if I'm not here. They ask questions like, can I go with my child if they get arrested? I'm really scared about what might happen if they are detained and they're not able to communicate. Can I give your kids my phone number? Or can I give your kids my phone number so that if they come home from school and no one's there, at least they'll have somebody to call if our house is empty? I don't know if you can imagine the fear that a family faces if they're the parent of a young person who is non-speaking or minimally speaking or has a hearing impairment and would not be able to comply with instructions from a federal officer. Or consider the child for whom sameness and routine is part of their disability, and that disruption, it comes across the board. They're not going to school and they're not getting any of their services from their preferred service providers. Basically, none of the supports that they have in place are coming through. We know that schools have shown up for communities in incredible ways, but we also must be realistic about the fact that, this is not really about turning back to normal. Normal wasn't working real well for many of our folks ahead of time. So as we make that shift, we really need to think about how we can improve things for our most marginalized students who were really struggling even before this crisis. You are all going to be asked to make some very difficult decisions about budgets, about discipline, about mental health. We know that the Blue Ribbon Commission was tasked with cutting $250 million from special education budgets right out of the gate before any of this happened. And at the same time, we are seeing systemic efforts to dehumanize, dismantle, destabilize services for people with disabilities. And I want to acknowledge, that's the environment we're living in right now. But the good news is Minnesotans have shown us that you can choose not to be part of that. You can say, not on my watch. You can say, I'm going to show up with kindness and connection, and I'm going to prioritize compassion. That's what Minnesotans have done, and we ask you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for jumping in at the last minute when your partner couldn't make it here. Heather Starks.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Heather Starks. I am a former educator and a proud school board member from Bloomington Public Schools. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As you have heard in previous testimony, Operation Metro Surge has had a profound impact on school communities across Minnesota, and Bloomington is no exception. Last fall, an elementary student in our district tragically lost her mother to cancer. In January, she witnessed her father being detained as he dropped her off at the bus stop. We do not know his whereabouts. She is now considered a homeless and highly mobile student due to her unstable living situation. Imagine being her, losing both parents and her home in a matter of months. Our district has also had elementary students, U.S. citizens born in this country, detained by ICE last month. Prior to their detention, they were attending school in person. Since their release, they have not returned. Imagine being them, losing the stability of school overnight. Other children attending in person carry their passports in their backpacks each day in the hopes of getting to and from school safely. Imagine being them, feeling the need to carry documentation just to go to school. These are 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, children whose biggest challenge of the day should be sharing a blue crayon with their classmate or remembering that 5 + 5 = 10. We know that children cannot learn when they do not feel safe, and right now, for many families, staying safe means staying home. During the week of January 12th, nearly 25% of our students were absent from our most diverse schools. District-wide, middle and high schools have been particularly affected, with more than half of our multilingual learners now chronically absent. Approximately 100 students receiving special education services are currently learning from home due to safety concerns. And in total, about 750 students, which is about roughly 8% of our district, are now in flexible learning environments. We also know that many of these students rely on free breakfast and lunch at school. So not only are we trying to figure out how to educate them at home, we also need to figure out how to feed them at home. These are not abstract policy debates. These are our children in our classrooms, and these are your children. Also, if you have not directly talked to a student about the impact of this, please talk to students. Yesterday, there was powerful testimony directly from students. They don't need adults to talk for them. They can share their stories, and please listen to them and please talk to them. Bloomington cut $5 million this year and is cutting another $5 million next year. We cannot support our students, our staff, and our families without additional funding. I thank this committee for considering this consequences and what we're working through and working towards solutions to help districts support our students at this time of crisis and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Hannah Graham, Tracy Bird, Christian Ledesma, and then the final three are Brian Rappy, Natasha Doctor, and Sandy Mulner. Once you get settled, Hannah Graham, school counselor, can go next. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is Hannah Graham, and I'm a high school counselor at Roseville Area High School. I want to start by saying that our educators and our communities are rising to the occasion in extraordinary ways. In partnership with families and community members, we are delivering food to hundreds of families. Staff and volunteers serve as community observers so students can travel to and from school with an added layer of reassurance. We are checking in on families and expanding food shelves and emergency supports so students' basic needs can be met. My classroom is now a makeshift food shelf. As counselors and social workers, we are spending hours extra every day to meet students' very basic needs. Our community is sending a clear message to students and families. You are not alone, and we are in this together. But the reality is that these supports exist because fear has entered students' daily lives in ways that directly affect their ability to learn. Recently, a junior student apologized for missing school after ICE was patrolling his neighborhood. His family stayed inside trying to decide if it was safe to leave their home, and then he said, "Miss, I thought I was going to die." That is not how 17-year-olds usually talk. It reflects the level of fear students are carrying before they even walk through our school doors, if they feel safe enough to come at all. When safety and basic needs are uncertain, students cannot learn. And that is why I'm here today as an educator. Educators and communities will continue to show up. We will continue feeding students, protecting belonging, and creating stability wherever we can. But students should not have to navigate fear just to access their education. They deserve stability that does not depend on emergency response from educators and volunteers. They deserve the ability to be students first, without carrying the weight of adult fears about safety and housing and survival. I urge you to consider policies and funding that protect stability for students and families, so schools can focus on what we are meant to do. Help young people learn, grow, and imagine a future that feels safe enough to believe in. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Tracy Bird, Teacher of the Year from 2024. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
My name is Tracy Bird. It's spelled B-Y-R-D, so that piece of paper, kind of like my students, it's wrong.
We corrected it.
It is okay. It is okay. I'm in my 9th year of teaching ELA at Minneapolis-Washburn, and in my short time, I've been through a global pandemic, a civil uprising, a school shooting to start this year, and now a federal occupation. So to say that my preparation in teacher school prepared me for this, probably not, or any other teacher, or how to sustain the hits as they keep coming. But one thing we know is the teachers will keep showing up for their students while the students keep showing up for their teachers. This is not going to break us. I asked my students I'm telling them I was going to be here, and did they have any words for you guys? And so student H said, it is scary having ice around. I hang out with my friends and often wonder if I'll see them tomorrow or what might happen to them when they go home. I look in every car and wonder if it's ice. I just want to see my friends again. Student J, how will families be brought back together? What do you plan to do with the families that have lost some family members? How are they supported? How are they supposed to recover after all is said and done? Student A, this is a dangerous situation you're putting us in. The taking of kids is hard to deal with, and it's impacting us and making us feel unsafe. Student O, school should be a safe place, not somewhere where you have to fear being taken away from your family. Student J, I feel really disappointed with the current state of our community in Minneapolis. Being impacted by ICE is really hard, especially not being able to go to school or anywhere else. I reached out to our social workers just to kind of see what they were saying, and our school secretary brought this to my attention of the same family I've been known for 7 years, have an asylum case in process, a single mom, 2 teens, have never asked for help until this year because her lawyer recommended not going through the courthouse because renewing her work visa because it was too dangerous doing things legally. So she couldn't work and therefore couldn't pay rent. As a result, one of her teens is now using and cutting herself. She has to help her mom clean houses instead of hanging out with her friends, and now they don't feel safe cleaning houses. The stories that I have and that you've heard for days and days and days and days and days aren't different. Like, we already know this. Some of this seems to me somewhat performative to see if we can check boxes and say, did we listen? And we'll check the boxes and say that we did. But I just wonder, at what point will we use our ability to recreate history? What we know is our children's and their children are going to be picking up the pieces for what's going on. So why not choose to make a better Minnesota? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Principal Christian Ledesman, who also from Roosevelt High, who's also recently named the Secondary Principal of the Year. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Christian Alberto Ledesma, and I'm the proud principal of Roosevelt High School in Minneapolis. I'm also a proud U.S.-born citizen, son of Ecuadorian immigrants who carries my passport everywhere I go now. But I'm here because of our students, because they are in crisis. On January 7th, the same day an ICE agent shot and killed Renee Good just a couple of miles away from our school, federal agents descended on our campus as part of a chase that ended on the sidewalk after dismissal. In the chaos that followed, one of our staff members was detained. Chemical irritants were deployed on students and teachers. Children ran. A senior told reporters, "I can't believe this is happening at a high school where people are just trying to learn." Minneapolis Public Schools canceled classes for 2 days following the incident, then offered remote learning options through April. Attendance has declined as families who fear federal enforcement have kept their children home. At Roosevelt alone, almost 400 students are choosing the online option, with over 6,000 students in Minneapolis choosing the option district-wide. Parents began voluntarily patrolling around our school during dismissal and arranging rides for students who no longer felt safe traveling to and from school. The point is also supported by research. Research published by the University of California found that immigration enforcement actions were directly linked to declines in academic achievement, attendance rates, and school climate measures. But behind the attendance data is something harder to measure: the effect on children's mental health. We all know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where if students do not feel safe because their families in this case are struggling to house and feed themselves because they can't leave their homes safely, they cannot focus on algebra and Macbeth. They don't know if their parents, will be home when they get there. This is on top of a student body that has already endured the collective trauma of George Floyd's murder and the impacts of COVID on their development. The American Psychiatric Association and peer-reviewed journals have documented the mental health toll of immigration enforcement on children across legal statuses, including US-born citizens. One report described children presenting with panic disorders, insomnia, self-injury, recurring nightmares, and school disengagement, not because of something that happened to them directly, but because of what they had witnessed happening to their families or their communities. Another study found that adolescents who experienced family member deportation faced higher risks of suicidal ideation and substance use. Children as young as 6 are presenting with clinical anxiety due to fear of family separation. Since January 7th, we have been managing a school and a trauma response. We have been subject to death and bomb threats. Our counselors, social workers, and therapists are overwhelmed. Staff are processing their own fear while holding space for their students. Students staying home face isolation and the loss of peer relationships and routines that are foundational for adolescent mental health. Simply put, a child cannot learn when their body is in survival mode. Fear and learning are incompatible. It's basic neuroscience. Yesterday, the House Education Committee failed to advance HF 3435, a bill that would have restored the basic protections our schools lost last year. I urge this body to keep fighting for legislation that guarantees our students the most basic condition of learning, which is safety. Please give our students the safety they need to learn and the support they need to heal. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. We are to our last 3 final testifiers. Brian Rapp, Natasha Doctor, and then Sandy Mullner. Once you get settled, go ahead. We can start with Brian Rapp. Please state your name for the record and proceed. Go ahead. State your name for the record. Proceed.
Brian Rappy, Burnsville School District. Co-chairs, committee members, thank you for taking the time for this. You've been here for a while and I greatly appreciate it. Also, please know this is my invitation to you. Any one of you that would like to come to my classroom, you are more than welcome. I'm a 6th grade teacher at Nicollet Middle School. I'm the former chair of Pellsby. The last 3 weeks have been very sad and frustrating. I've worked in Burnsville School District since the spring of 1995. If it weren't for the Somali families who moved into our community, I don't believe I would have had a career that I've had in Burnsville. Those families helped stabilize our enrollment and became an important part of our school community and our school family. We also have a large Hispanic population that enriches our community and strengthens our schools. What makes me especially sad and frustrated is that this last week, at our Welcome to 6th grade event for incoming families, our Somali and Hispanic families were largely absent. This was very unusual, and they were deeply missed. The same pattern repeated Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday this week at our conferences. These families are an essential part of our schools, and their absence is felt in our classrooms and in our hallways. Many of our minority students in my class are arriving at school anxious and scared. Some are not sleeping because they are on watch, helping protect their families. Others simply cannot sleep because of fear. They do not fully understand what is happening, but they do know enough to be frightened. That fear is affecting their ability to learn. They come into my classroom struggling to participate, struggling to focus, and struggling to feel safe. My special education classes has lost about 30% of our students. They're in virtual learning, hopefully. There's times I feel I can't ask how they're doing, just for their safety. The less I know, the better they're doing. The academic gains we have made are now interrupted. Many of these students are already behind in reading, and this disruption will cause them to fall even further. As teachers and case managers, we are already stretched thin. We'll find the time, and we will do everything we can to help these students catch up. But this is an interruption to their academic journeys. They should not have to endure this. I wish I could give you a dollar amount for what this interruption is costing us. I cannot. What I do know is that in an already tight budget with limited staff, we are being asked to do more with even less. We hope our students will return when they feel safe. Yet, I never thought I'd have to say this in America. 12-year-olds in my classroom should not feel unsafe coming to school. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Next up is Natasha Doctor. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon. Thank you, chairs, vice chairs, and members of the committee. My name is Natasha Doctor, and I am a Minneapolis Public Schools social studies teacher, and currently I serve as the first vice president of the Minneapolis Federation of Educators. I am here today because as a leader in our educator union, I have the profound responsibility to support our members in ensuring schools are safe and stable places where all our students can exercise their constitutional right to a public education. To say the past few months have been a challenge in keeping our schools safe and stable places for learning is an understatement. And this afternoon, you have heard about many examples of why that is. My colleague from Minneapolis, Principal Ledesma, shared about an example that we have experienced in Minneapolis. We had agents on school property deploying chemical irritants on students and educators during dismissal. Dismissal is a typical day-to-day routine that educators play a huge part in. That day, federal immigration enforcement violated that safe environment. And unfortunately, that instance that we saw at Roosevelt was not surprising. The violence and dangerous tactics employed by immigration enforcement agencies is a daily reality across our state right now. And Roosevelt happened to be collateral damage. And the perpetrator of that violence is federal immigration enforcement, and it is impacting our schools every day. It's led to loss of learning time, and in Minneapolis, we had to cancel school the following 2 days because the conditions in our city were unsafe for children to go to school. And many of our students remain at home because of the conditions. Because of all of these unsafe practices that we have seen by agents, educators are raising far above the call of duty of educators. They are supporting families, ensuring students can travel to school safely, working in partnership with community to ensure that students and families remain in their homes, and are working in partnership with community to make sure families have food. Families are scared to leave not because of their homes, not because of their immigration status, but because of the tactics that are being used by federal agents. To close, educators are going above and beyond in this moment, and we are imploring you, as our elected officials, to find the courage to act this session when you consider education funding and the many, many needs you have heard about today. And we ask that you take steps to protect the safety and well-being of our most precious resource in our state, our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last testifier is remote. It's Sandy Milner, teacher at St. Paul Public Schools. Could you please come online, state your name for the record, and proceed?
Hi, my name is Sandy Milner. I'm a high school teacher in a small St. Paul public school. Thank you for the opportunity to let me speak about the ongoing threats to our community and what is needed to provide equitable learning environments for our students. I am coming directly from an online class. 100% of my students are online right now. ICE is keeping students out of school, and this needs to stop. You need to protect them, to protect us. Many of my colleagues do not look like me. They carry their passports and IDs. I do not feel comfortable sharing all the work that we have done to help students to learn during this time. I do not trust that I will be safe and not targeted. I cannot fit all of the damage that has been done into these 2 or 3 minutes. I'm here today to testify based on what I see in my school and in my community, not on behalf of SPPS. At my school, these attacks began last January. Legal status, normal procedures, and the certainty of knowing what are the correct steps have been lost to us for over a year. I'm exhausted from looking kids in the eye when their constitutional protections are not being honored, knowing that I cannot promise to keep them safe. Students and families have quietly disappeared. Our community has seen parents, cousins, even our own students taken, some later released. No apologies, just a system of terror. We need your help. We need your help making things right, making our intent for these students match our impact. Before Metro Surge, Minnesota's public education funding system was already broken. Students shouldn't be punished for living in a community with a small tax base. Everyone deserves an opportunity to an equitable education. I beg you, fix inequitable funding. Eliminate the technology gap. Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that learning can't happen without food, shelter, and safety first. Help us focus on those. You can help us by pushing your colleagues to see that investing in our children is that, an investment, not a burden. Mostly, I have questions. How will you ensure districts have the resources to keep all students physically and emotionally safe to learn? How are you going to support us as we try to help families piece their lives back together? Will you have our back as we deal with all of the impacts documented here today? Over the past 30 years, I have had the privilege to teach thousands of beautiful humans. Do you know what the majority of them have said to me? All of them, learning English and trying to graduate from high school in this great country. What do you want to do after you're done with high school? I ask. Most of them, their answer is help. Help others. Help my community. I hope you can live up to their aspirations. I want a world where leaders answer that question the same way as my students do. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for giving us your time, too. And with that, members, we're running close on the end of committee, and we are adjourned.